me, if you could give me host privileges too, Mike, that'd be helpful.
Yep.
So I'll frame this by saying that tonight is a lot less structured. Tonight is a lot more about what you're interested in talking about and doing. I only have one real agenda item, and that is to provide you the opportunity to watch a deliberation and see how that works. And I'm happy to see that Andrew is here and Russ is here. And there was one more person, I think, who had completed it. Oh, David Abel. David, are you here? I'm switching back and forth between screens.
Yes, I am.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So, David, you're under DOCAB. I was a little bit of a lag there, right? Is that you, DOCAB?
That would be me, yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. So, there's no easy way to say this without sounding like I'm shaming people. Only 3 people completed the individual model allocation after reviewing the debate, which is fine. Some people were having trouble. We're still working some bugs out. I know that you're all busy people. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to say that to say that you didn't complete your assignments like you promised. That's not at all what I'm saying. But actually, it provides us a really nice opportunity in some ways, because if David and Andrew and Russ are willing, I'd like to have them deliberate while the rest of us watch. And if that would be okay, that's kind of how I plan to proceed tonight. Is that fine with David and Abel and Andrew?
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll get to that in just a few minutes. I do want to also introduce Dane Schoonover. Dane is our chief software engineer, chief technical officer. He's the guy that designs and builds all this crazy stuff and is an amazing human being. He's here kind of just to hang out and see how things work. And if you have questions or suggestions or anything that might involve the technical side of things, I know he'd be happy to. Dane, I don't know if you wanted to say anything or not, but you could at least say hello, I suppose.
Yeah, hello everybody. Happy to be here. I'm calling in from outer space. It's really just so you can't see how messy everything is behind me. But yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. So let me do this. We'll just work with people as they show up. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So at this point, if you could just, somebody could confirm that you're seeing a screen that says classes on it, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so obviously this is where you land when you sign on as an instructor to Argutopia. I've got 2 classes here. One is an old Debate 101 class. One is the class that I made for this training. So I'm going to open that up. And the perspective I'm getting now is that of the instructor. You're all playing the role of students, either students who debated or students who are in a few minutes here going to judge. But I wanted to kind of show you how this looks as the assignment unfolds and what you can do with this. Now, keep in mind, this is an asynchronous debate. One of the things that I am going to show you tonight is some new features that Dane just got done completing over the course of the weekend. And that's for live debates. So I'll walk you through the live debates options as well. But recall that for tonight, we're looking at this asynchronous debate that we set up and executed last week. So from an instructor's perspective, I can go into take a look at this assignment. And importantly, so here I can take a look at the various parameters of the assignment and have some control over what the assignment looks like. One of the things that I can do right now is to publish out the average model to the debaters, which means that of all the individual judges who submitted a model, now the debaters who participated in the debate can go back and take a look at what each individual judge saw as the debate, and they can take a look at the average of all those judges' models. So I'm going to publish those out to the debaters. I'll publish those same models to the deliberation group. So now students can see each other's models if they were judges. And eventually we're going to complete a consensus model. So that can then be shared with the debaters as well. But the more important part from the instructor's perspective is the ability to actually see what happened in the debate. So I chose this submissions tab here, and that takes me to this page that allows me to see what debate I'm looking at. There's the topic for our debate. We've got this demo debate tab here. You can largely ignore that. That's just a way for you to get access to a null version of the model in case you want to use it to demonstrate for your students what it is they would be doing and what you'd expect them to do. each of the actual debates will be numbered. So this one shows up as debate 2. This is the one we put together and designed last time. And so here you can see when each of the debaters recorded their speeches. So Kim recorded hers November 11th at 5:53. November 12th was Johnny's. Tony recorded his on the 14th, and Wesley on the 15th. But the cool part is from here, I can watch each of these speeches. So I can hit this watch speech button, and that will pull up Kim's speech. And then I'm not sure if Zoom is picking this up, but here I can see Kim actually giving her speech. Can you guys see the video frame or not?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, good. Okay. So I can watch this speech, I can review it, and I can do that for each of the debaters in turn and take a look at what they did, how they recorded their speeches, even evaluate their speeches, of course, from here if I'd like to. Down the road, we plan to build in tools that will allow you to actually have the capacity to comment on these speeches directly to the students. So time-stamped comments on the video, so you could provide direct feedback to the students about things that they're doing in the moment of the video that they're doing it, and providing them that sort of feedback. That's down the road a ways when we start building out the assessment components of the site. But for now, at least, you can get a chance to review those speeches. Also, if I've required the debaters to use the model as a preparation template, I can also take a look at the model that they've completed. And so in this case, you can see that Kim did record some arguments on her model, and I can pull each of those arguments up and look at the claim as well as the reasoning and evidence that she provided in support of that claim. Again, this provides you the ability just to take a look at what the students were doing in preparing for the debate or preparing for their speech. And as each subsequent student records a speech, the assumption is that they will have watched the previous speech, and ideally I'd be able to review their models. Looks like Johnny didn't fill his out, but I'd be able to review each subsequent model to see if the students are capturing the main arguments from previous speeches, and just see how that debate is kind of unfolding from their perspective. Down at the bottom, though, is where I've got access to the students who are assigned to judge. And so here is where I can take a look at the students' perspective on the debate and their allocation, their manipulation of the model based upon their assessment of the arguments that were exchanged. So from each of these, I can pull up and take a look at those models, and I can see Russ's here, so I can see the arguments that he recorded. I can see how he allocated the model and get a sense of what it was he thought was most important and who was winning each side of the model. And I can do that for everyone that I know has filled out a model. Again, we'll build in eventually assessment tools that allow you to comment on these models and provide feedback directly to the students about what they did well, what they did poorly, any other comments that you want to make to them. But the point of all this is that it provides you that one central location to get that bird's eye view of the debate and everything that's happening as the assignment unfolds. One of the cooler features, though, is that assuming that all of these models have been completed, we also allow you to see an average of all the models. So assume that we had, say, these 10 or 11 judges all watching this debate, all completing their individual models and allocating the space according to the issues that you've used to design that debate. What I can do then is just click this button to see an average version of the model. And so it's clear that of the models that were completed, most of them saw the first issue as being the most important issue. And all of them, it looks like, or most of them, the majority of them, the average of them, saw the pro side winning on both this first and third issue, and a much closer call on that second issue. So when I publish that out to the debaters, now they can go back in, take a look at this model as well, get some feedback on what the audience's reaction to their arguments were, and more importantly, kind of get a sense of why the audience might have made the decision that they made. Of course, this doesn't take the place of a well-articulated rationale for the decision, but hopefully part of that process might be augmented by having students write about or talk about the decisions that they've made, or when they engage in that process of deliberation, they're having that conversation about which arguments they preferred, which issues they saw as most significant and less significant, and ideally speaking to the reasons why they did. So I'll pause for a second before we jump on to anything else from there and ask if there are questions, comments, insights, feedback, anything that you all had as a reaction to either this explanation or actually participating in the debate or participating in the judging.
I think that one of the things that I found hard listening to all the speeches was that I purposely was using the model instead of a traditional flow, and I didn't know where to put responses.
Mm. Yeah, for those who for those of us, I should say, because the vast majority of us come from a debate background, for those of us who have a pretty deep immersion in the sort of linear approach to note-taking, the flowing process, the model can be frustrating, and I'll acknowledge that, because it doesn't necessarily do a pretty good job of connecting arguments to other arguments other than by placing them in the right issue space. But it doesn't say, well, this argument was responding to that argument, and this argument was relevant to this other argument over here. I thought of some ways to do that, Russ, drawing lines between relationships between arguments and that sort of thing. So that's a possibility down the road, but I've got to put some more thinking into what that does and how complex that makes the model. I think, at least for novice debaters, we're probably talking about largely constructive efforts on their part, where they really are just building out arguments, and we cross our fingers and hope that they engage the other side's arguments. But I don't know how much of that is likely to occur, particularly in an asynchronous debate, but you make a very valid point.
Yeah, my approach was pretty much the mirror image of Russ's. I took a flow and then went back to fill in the model. And so I didn't experience quite that level of frustration, other than when I put it in the model, I couldn't reflect. If the debaters were reading what I put in the model, they wouldn't necessarily see where I saw connections or I saw lack of connections. I think you make a good point, though. With novice debaters, I am happy if they construct arguments, right? Instead of just throwing out whatever. If it's really a sound argument, I am pleased with that. And then the next step in the process is making those connections. So, but I kind of went at it the other direction.
Yeah, I don't believe that would be a problem in a language arts class or a social studies class or a science class, where everyone is not trained in that sort of linear flowchart version of note taking that we all use.
Well, and they're different functions is what they are, right? The flow is a real-time record of the round, and the model is ideally sort of an analytic aid that helps you see the whole controversy. So it's to what extent I can make the model more a real-time record of the round, I'm not sure if that actually ends up kind of compromising its utility for the broader analytic function that it might serve as well. But it's something I've thought about. It's something I've not yet put a great deal of thought into or a great deal of work into, but it's definitely something that's on my radar.
One of the things that I experienced doing this is the process of determining which side I felt was winning a particular question was pretty straightforward. I think you're right. The analytical side of it works very well for that purpose. What was a little less easy to do, and maybe it's just because of the nature of this particular debate, was assigning the relative weight of the three questions.
So did you find that challenging because the debaters didn't address it, or did you find that challenging because the model didn't adequately capture it in the way that you were hearing it argued by the debaters?
I lean towards it being more of the first than the second, but I think both elements were there.
Okay.
And I will also say, in all honesty, after I originally assigned the weight to the model and then was putting in arguments, I went back and changed the weighting because the process of evaluating the respective arguments kind of led me to reevaluate how much weight I had put on each of the questions.
I thought it was interesting that it felt like
That's
the
a good exercise.
debaters actually assigned the same level of weight to the arguments I kind of did before the debate started. It was like we almost all universally decided which was the most important and which was the least important before we ever started.
I'm not sure I'm tracking with you, Russ. Why before you ever started?
Well, I mean, I looked at the model ahead and thought, going into the debate, where do I stand? I think that I thought that was part of the instruction. And as I reflect on it now, that shouldn't be part of the instruction. Like you would want them to start reading, right? But as the debate proceeded, it was like all of these debate people are looking at these questions with almost exactly, if you go back and just think about the amount of time people spent on arguments and the amount of actual evidence or warrants that were spent on each argument, the weight kind of came out the way that I adjusted it a little bit after the debate, but not very much.
Interesting. Well, that's actually insightful on a couple of different levels. I mean, you're right. The assumption is that you would not pre-allocate the model, that it would be perfectly neutral before the debate began. That, of course, reflects the tabula rasa ideal, right? That you're supposed to set aside biases and listen to the arguments made by the debaters. But the truth of the matter is that's not the way the world works. That's certainly not the way probably novice debaters are going to approach it. So maybe there is some utility. And I think we touched upon this last Wednesday when we were talking too, I think in response to a point that you had made, Russ. Maybe there is some utility in asking people to allocate the model before any arguments are ever made, to give the debater some insight into what the prevailing presumptions of the audience are. And that's something that I hadn't thought a great deal about in terms of building it in as a feature, but maybe that's something I would like to include, that gives some strategic insight to the debaters about where they should spend the bulk of their time, what they should be doing. That assumes a level of strategic preparation that most novice debaters probably aren't going to take on, but it does provide at least some utility for the model for more advanced debaters to think about what might be important and what they should be addressing.
Well,
Yeah,
and you can set the significance beforehand, right? Before you even start typing, you can create the size that you want for each question.
You certainly can, Wesley, but we're talking about whether you do that before you watch the debate or after you watch the debate.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the beauties of the thing that you have currently created as it sits is that as I played with it, I could see myself using it one way in my speech classes, another way in my debate one classes, and a completely different way in my advanced debate class. I had planned to do a version of this in my advanced debate class last week. You and I talked about that by email.
Yeah. Yes.
And we didn't get past the conversation about thinking about the debate at the two different planes. And so we have not tried it with the model yet, but I'm going to be interested to see if any of that conversation finds its way. Like I talk with my kids a lot. I'm sure that everybody else in this window is too, about in those last rebuttals, giving the judge language that you want to see on a ballot, right? And I'm going to be interested to see if any of that conversation makes its way onto ballots this weekend.
I'd be very interested too, Russ. Please let me know if you actually do find some evidence that is translating through your kids into the ballot.
Yeah, I think my mode of thinking as a participant kind of came into it too, because I built my speech doc and then I thought, well, what am I going for? Right. That's my, our natural reaction having been around. And then my brain caught up and said, maybe that's not really what we're trying for with this activity. This is the order that the other two participants have done it in. That's probably more logical for people with less experience to follow. And that's kind of, that's why I kept the same order.
My whole approach was to make fun of Antony's slow worm pun.
That was a heck of a joke.
Your speaker points were getting docked there, Boston.
You notice that there was no place you could enter speaker points on the model. That's by design. Well, why don't we do this? If we've got the three that have completed the individual model, Russ, David, and Andrew, why don't we put them on the spot and ask them to do some deliberation to see if they can't come up with agreement about a collective allocation model, a consensus-based model. So here's what I'd like you to do. If one of you would be willing, David, how about I put you on the spot? If you would be willing to share your screen and open up Argutopia, and Russ and let's see, Russ and Andrew, you two can go ahead and open up Argutopia, but I'm not going to have you share your screens. Oh, Mike, I'm sorry. I might need you to make David a host so he can share his screen.
I think everybody should be able to share their screen. David, do you
Okay.
see a share screen button? I'm going to make you a co-host.
I wonder if David didn't freeze up. He looks like he's frozen. Either that or he's very, very concentrating very hard on something. Okay, we're going to assume he's frozen. There's Russ. Oh, excellent, Russ. Okay. So if David and Andrew both have Argutopia open to this screen as well, what you can do now, Russ, is you can go to the icon there that looks like two squares interconnected. Yep. And if you click on that, you should be able to pull up and see each individual's model. Now, there's going to be a whole lot more there than you're actually going to use. And I'm wondering why only yours is available. Let me check something. I might not have made that available yet. So hold on just 1 second.
Steve, I could see the other models on mine.
You can, Pi. Let me stop sharing and let you share.
Okay.
And Russ, what you might need to do is you might need to refresh your screen. You might have had Argutopia open before I made those permissions active. So if you just refresh your screen.
Hi, small child in the background. I have to say hello.
Did you see that again?
Hello, Miss Kavanaugh's child in the background.
I can see them now, Steve. I just refreshed and it's good.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So we're looking at Andrew's screen right now, but both Russ and David can see the same sort of screen if they click on that icon that compares the different models. So now what you're seeing on the left there is that quick visual reference of the different models that each of the judges has allocated individually. Typically, these groups would be 3 to 5 people. So you're seeing a whole lot more of those blank models that says no model yet. You're seeing a lot more of those blank models than you would typically see. Usually it's a much more compact version of that, but it allows you that quick point of reference to give you that quick overview of what other people are seeing. And also, Andrew, if you wanted to, you could click on any of those models. You could click, for example, on Russ's model to get a more detailed view of what his arguments were. And then you can do that with any of the other models as well to get a more detailed view of what other people had put in there. But if you now, Andrew, if you now go back up to the top of your screen, and in the drop-down menu that currently says David Able, you should see an option that says consensus. And if David and Russ would also switch over to consensus model, that should produce for you this neutral version of the model. So the expectation now is that there would be conversation amongst all of the judges to allocate a common model. So I'm happy to turn it over to Andrew, Russ, and David at this point to have some discussion about what they decided and how they decided it and what they'd like their consensus model to look like. And by the way, David, if you adjust your screen, if you adjust your model, well, in the consensus view, it will show up on Russ and David's screens as well, assuming they too are on the consensus view. So every move that you make is a move that's going to show up on theirs as well. So imagine 3 or 5 students grouped around each with a laptop in front of them, using it to illustrate what their preferences are by showing, by actually manipulating the model in front of them.
So should we talk about the relative weight of the arguments and then talk about the allocation, or the other way around?
I think we all have the same arguments for the most part, from what I gathered.
And this too is part of what the instructor can make a decision about. Sometimes it's easiest just to have the students work with the allocation of space. Sometimes you want them to actually come to consensus on what the major arguments were and to fill out the consensus model by putting the actual arguments in there. Tonight, I'm not going to ask you to do that because that's a lot of work. It's good work, but it's a lot of work to come to consensus on what the major arguments were and which should be recorded in each individual space on the issues.
Now,
But
one thing that I'm kind of, I'm personally struggling with right now is there's the consensus model, but for me to reference my model, I probably have to open another window.
you could, or you could click on the quick visual reference over there too. That would get you to your model quickly as well.
But can I, hold on.
Yeah, I think I understand what Andrew's saying. He wants to be able to look at both full models at the same time.
Ah, with the actual arguments present there is what you're saying.
Which I think the way
And you can do it
I
by
probably
opening
do
the second
that.
window, Andrew, I just did that. So here's what I'm interested in initially, at least with the other two judges. We all very clearly allocated the first question to the pro, and it looks like we all did that within about, like, if I play with the model, it looks like we all did it at what would be about an average of maybe that much or a little more. Does that seem?
I think that's right.
Okay, and then, but the one that we're most, and the third one also seems like David is
There's
pretty.
some disagreement on David, but you and I are definitely in agreement.
David, did you lean pro there at all or con there at all, or did you see that as a wash?
Pretty much a wash.
Okay.
I will say that going into the final speech, I was probably in the same world you and Andrew were on that question.
Okay.
But the last speaker's argument about methods versus evaluation, they're two different things, pulled me back towards this is a wash.
Okay. So in terms of consensus, is it fair to say that we lean con, or is it fair to say that since David saw that as a wash, do we all see it as a wash, or do we more of us lean that was a con? I mean, part of this is deliberation, right? David is saying, here's why I viewed it that way. Does that sway, Andrew, does that sway?
I just never thought that there was a really good answer to the privileged economy argument.
I didn't either. I actually, I thought that was a really, really well articulated argument.
Yeah.
So
the con answer to it was essentially, it exists, but don't change anything. It was kind of like, until someone explained it to me, why perm do the counter plan is not a negative argument, but it's just phrased wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I fought with people for a long time about, like, well, perm do the counter plan is actually a negative argument, but the way that argument actually means in policy debate is it's a way the affirmative can be done. And it's just worded wrong. We in policy debate word it wrong all the time.
David, would what I just did with the model on that question be acceptable to you?
Yeah.
You're
I
the
would
one
say on
who
that
saw it wash, so.
On that last argument, I'm with you guys. I was very much persuaded by the privilege argument.
Okay.
Until it was suggested that could be more about method than grading. And since the core question we were asked to resolve is traditional grading, that kind of put me at it. Well, maybe the privilege exists because of the way we teach kids instead of the way we evaluate them. And that kind of left me with, okay, this is all a wash for me.
Okay.
The method argument comes really late in the debate, though. It's late breaking.
It is.
Yeah, but now you're thinking about your debate training as opposed
Oh,
to.
I know it is. And what I have to do in my head is even if this were just like a regular debate, just the Argutopia debate, what would the pro say?
Right.
We don't get
And
a
the pro
3
probably says something about, I don't know what they say, but you know,
The
the
middle
system's
question
broken
was-
probably because of traditional grading. I don't know, but who knows?
The thing I would add
for me
here,
was
I mean,
watch.
Andy makes a good point, and so does Russ, about maybe we're all falling back on our inner debater. I
Right.
tried as hard as I could to put myself in the mindset of
It's
a teacher in a classroom listening to students who are not debaters debating, and try to see it that way. And so while Andrew is right, that argument came late. If I were a classroom instructor, I would be impressed that the argument came at all.
right.
True, true, true.
So the middle argument, the incentives argument, that seemed like, I'm sorry for the debaters who are here who are listening to this, but that seemed like nobody knew exactly what to do with that question to me.
I think that if you look at the three of our models, you moved the needle a tiny bit, and David and I kind of stayed the same.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I
I'm
mean?
pretty happy moving that needle right to the middle. I
I'm
don't,
fine with that.
I
Yeah.
kind of agree with you about that. I just didn't think anybody knew exactly what they wanted to articulate maybe on that question. It was like everybody wants to say our thing will motivate better, but nobody knew exactly how to say why.
I mean, the best debate that probably happened there was, if this is where I remember, this is the, hey, by the way, you do well so you could be a Supreme Court justice. And it's like, oh, P.S., this is where the privilege debate comes in. P.S., privilege means that all these people are Supreme Court justices.
Well, I think that was on the third question.
It kind of it got blurred between the two for me.
There was an attempt by the con to make a turn that the alternatives actually decrease incentives, and I thought that was kind of a valiant effort, but I didn't think it was very well explained.
What I think is absolutely funny about the Harvard for all that argument is a lot of those Ivy League schools do not use traditional grading. And those are the people that end up in the professions that were talked about. So I just, as an aside.
So looking at the way we've played with the model, does that look okay to the two of you in terms of consensus? Does that look fair, or should we play with anything?
I think that's about right.
Okay.
I could deal with that.
There's one element here that was kind of running through my head, and I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this as clearly as I would like, but part of me wondered the relative merit or the relative strength of each area, how much of that was an intentional choice by the debaters to allocate their time and efforts in a place, and how much of, because clearly we seem to think that the first argument was the one that had the most weight. How much of that was because it was first?
That's a fair question. I don't know the answer to that.
And in particular, I'm looking at that again from the perspective of a teacher in a classroom with students who are not trained debaters, because you and I, anybody who's taught a speech class knows that students, when they give a speech, will tend to put a lot of effort into the very first thing that they deal with.
Number one is always
They're top heavy.
Right. And then they see the timer counting down and decide, oh, maybe I better get to the other 2 points.
Yeah. That's
No,
fair.
and-
I don't know. I will say that this was where, since I was the one who ignored the instructions and actually pre-weighted things.
Well, no. I didn't do that, Russ, but I will say that I went through and listened to the entirety of the debate, wrote some notes down, and then went back into the model and did not do the model and the debate at the same time.
Okay.
Because I wanted time to digest what I had heard.
Well, I pre-assessed the weights almost exactly the way I felt like the debaters weighted them. And I don't know.
I figured that out at the end.
David was saying, and they just were top. I don't know.
Might be an interesting classroom exercise to do it that way.
Yeah.
Like pre-weight it, get a consensus of the classroom on a particular subject, pre-weight it based on their input.
And
Have
then
the
see if
debate.
things change.
Yeah, and look and see how did they change, and have students try to explain why they think they changed that way.
Well, and again, David, I think the beauty of this is that you might do that one time one way and another time another. Like
Certainly.
it's depending on the classroom situation and who you're
Sure.
teaching and what you're like. It might just depend.
I'm thinking in particular, one of the exercises I did in AP government classes was to have them take a Supreme Court case and essentially debate it over again. And I'm thinking, had I had this model in hand, I probably on some of them would have done exactly that. What's your perception of the case before you've even heard the arguments?
Well,
Okay, now what is it? Because I can think of a few cases where we had some discussions, Loving versus Virginia, for example. What the students thought going in and what they thought after they had debated the particular case, there was a huge change in attitude.
well, and particularly in the case of like rehearing a Supreme Court case with the attitudes about how can I say that, and like traditional judicial conservatism, you
Yeah.
might want to have people playing justices do a little bit of pre-allocating.
Right,
I
right.
think I see where Steve has the debate center instruction piece going with this though, because the first thing that I'm thinking about besides like kind of like Supreme Court cases are history, like whether or not the Patterson plan or the two, though I can't remember the other name of the other one, but whether or not that's a good thing, or whether or not certain things in history, read them, put them in the model, figure out how the class sides on things, and then have a discussion in class about like, why did you lean on this side of history? Or why did you, I think that would be particularly good. I think this would make current events class super fun.
The dropping of the nuclear bombs in World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Yes.
Anyway,
So-
we've gone way past you wanted us to talk about consensus, and now we're off into like.
Yeah.
I'm loving every minute of this. You guys can go on as long as you want. I just want to make sure everybody else is still on board with things. So I guess just a couple of pieces of reflection based upon the conversation you had about the allocation of the model. I mean, it's tough to say, but because particularly you're all trained debate experts, and so it's not easy to say whether or not this is as intuitive. But one of the things that I thought was remarkable was how quickly you all were able to talk about where your attention was focused and why your attention was focused there. And it wasn't just, I liked this argument, it was comparative. And that's a difficult idea to get to for kids. I really believe that the model provides a significant on-ramp toward that discussion, which has always proved to me to be one of the most valuable things about the model, is that it gets their attention focused on that sort of comparative assessment of arguments relative to one another. And I think that makes all the difference in terms of having them think more deeply about that. So I hope that your experience, I hope to have deliberations in my classes like you had as a deliberation here.
Quick question, Steve, and I'm just thinking about this like technically, and Russ and David, you could chime in here too. So besides us having consensus about the model, would we, in a classroom setting, will we add the arguments into each side again?
That's certainly another level of interaction that you could require your students to have. Sometimes I do that when I have a lot of time and when I really want the students to wrestle with the arguments. I say, you're creating a common record of the debate. So I want all 3 or 5 or however many are deliberating in the group.
So
I want you
in
all
that
to agree
case-
on what the major arguments are and record them on the model. Sometimes
In
I
that
want
case-
a more quick deliberation, and they just use the model to illustrate the allocation of territory and not necessarily recording the arguments there.
So in that case, would it serve the program and the model to where I have my model open, there's a consensus model open, I can drag and drop arguments into the consensus without having to type them again?
Sure.
If the consensus, I mean, I don't know if that's something that should be added, but just something that speeds things up for you in the classroom. So, if that is the assignment you've given Russ, David, and I, that instead of one of us typing it all out again, we just come to a consensus like, okay, this is the argument as we see fit. Let's drag and drop it into the pro side or the con side. That way it just kind of saves time a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if that could happen or if it's right click it or something, but.
Oh, that's a terrific suggestion. One of the only minor concerns I have, and we can work this out, is just how much screen real estate it takes to display 2 models simultaneously. So we'll figure out a way to make that accessible. The model, I think, I think there's probably enough screen area on any given laptop that you can probably have two of the models displayed and still make them legible. And once you've got that done, then it's pretty easy to drag and drop things from one to another. So I like that idea a lot. Andrew, could I ask you to stop sharing your screen now and give that option back to me? Perfect, thanks.
All yours.
So that's the manner in which it works at that point. Once they've reached that consensus, well, I would add one more thing. So one of the things that is not yet built into Argutopia, but is always a presumed part of the assignments that I use whenever I assign these sorts of projects to students, is to somehow articulate the rationale, right? So if they're completing an individual model and they record the arguments on the model, they allocate the space, terrific. But that's really a visual aid that doesn't tell the entirety of the story. Making them explain why they did that is an important part of that. Whether they do that in oral form or they do that in written form, I think is an important component. Now, that can also happen after the consensus process. It would be a significant challenge to try to get a group of 3 or 5 students to write a collective document that expresses the rationale, but it's entirely possible that after deliberation, each individual student could write about their experience in deliberation, what concessions they made, what points they won, how they arrived at consensus by cooperating and discussing these things. I think that is an important layer of that sort of metacognitive benefit that we're getting out of that discussion as well. So don't overlook the importance of the reason for decision, as every ballot necessarily should include something like that. It's an important part of what your students can get out of this as well.
I wanted to comment earlier there saying something, but I also didn't want to influence the deliberation. They were talking about how there were different like amounts of like degrees to which, oh, this first one is more relevant, and this second one we didn't talk about as much, and this third one. And I think that was kind of a natural progression, at least for me, from the 3 videos that I watched beforehand. It felt like it had already kind of developed into the first one is being talked about. So I was basically just kind of addressing the points that had been made at that point, with the same amount of argumentation. So I think it kind of builds itself off of maybe the first 2 arguments.
It could. I mean, in Wesley, I think what you're seeing probably there is just the natural sort of evolution of a debate. As one issue becomes increasingly important, more people argue about it, which requires subsequent speakers to pay more attention to it, and it just continues to increase in magnitude. But the flip side of that, of course, is ignored issues might provide you opportunities to address things that others haven't developed, and that gives you the opportunity to talk with that sort of strategic insight for your students. Johnny, you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I find hilarious is I think that circumstances may have influenced the subsequent, the third and the fourth speech, because I had to wait till Friday to record, but my Friday was like I taught, and then I had a meeting right after school, and then I had supper with my wife, and then I went to the play, and then I had to scramble to get this done as quickly as possible, because I had to get up at 3 in the morning to go to a tournament to town, so I can go to a tournament at 4. And so like I had done a little bit of research at some point during the day and found some points I wanted to make, recorded a video, and I was super proud of it, and I realized it was like 8 minutes long. I'm like, okay, crap. So that's not gonna work. So I just went to my document that I had read from, and I just like wholesale through like whole paragraphs out. Like, I don't need that. That's too wordy. Gone. And so like what I ended up with was like, and I think in the video my hair is sticking up back here because it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, God, I gotta go to bed. And then that's what you got. So
what 100% same. I was like, I have this 8-minute speech, and I'm like, well, this won't work, so I'll shop it. Like, okay, it's 6 minutes. I'm like, I'm supposed to be at 3, but they all went over, so you know what? I'm gonna.
I
But I
monitor.
still
Those
chopped
three
it
and a
up
half.
even more, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm under 5. This will do.
I monitor a public speaking class for our local community college, which means it's taught online, and I'm just there with the kids in the classroom. And all of those assignments are due at midnight on Sunday night. And I believe absolutely that that professor sees these speeches every Monday that you just described.
Well, I just want to, again, first of all, I want to say I'm not sure where all the lazy teachers are, because every time I interact with folks like you and you tell me what your average day looks like, my palms begin to sweat, because I don't know that I can keep up a schedule like that, despite the fact that the common consensus seems to be that you do very little and enjoy 4 or 5 months worth of vacation every year. But more importantly, I want to say thanks again to all the folks who were taking that incredibly precious and limited time to actually participate in this. It was to make this work really depended upon a lot of contribution from you, and so thank you so much to the time that you took to all the debaters,
For the
as well
record,
as those
that
who
perm
reviewed the
do
debates.
both was a very well developed argument before I chopped it to pieces.
Yeah. Well, he hit me on privilege really hard with the grading, and I had like a whole paragraph like anticipating that argument. And so when I saw Anthony's speech, I'm like, of course. All right, well, it's over. Whatever.
Well, I tell you what, in terms of respecting your time, what I'd like to turn our attention to now is showing you some of the features that we just rolled out as of this morning, and kind of walk you through how those are set up. And those are particularly, I think, useful for those of you who are teaching live in-person debate classes, because that's the component that we've built out. So I think I will share my screen and walk you through how you build an in-person debate and show you some of the differences from what building an asynchronous debate looks like. So back to our same screen, I'm in my class, the Astra training class. Here's our debate that we were just talking about. And it now has, of course, all of those submissions available that I can now review if I want to. But what we're going to do now is build out a new assignment. So it's going to look a little different than it did last time we showed it to you, but a lot of the same features are present. What is now available as an option is this real-time in-person debates. So I'm going to select that and walk through how to put that together. Some of this is going to look familiar. The first thing we ask is, when do you want the assignment to begin? And that is about when your students would be able to access the assignment. So we're going to assume that we want it to start today. Also, the same sort of topic and issue building process exists with one important addition. So now, in addition to being able to build out topics and identify issues for whatever sort of idiosyncratic topic you might be working with in your disciplinary area, you can also add resources to every debate. So you can label a resource. So this could be a pro argument from The Economist. And then you drop the link right in here. And then when the students go to prepare for their debate, they will have access to these resources. They'll see those labels and they can click on that to reference the material that you want. A lot of the debate kits already have resources built into them. And most often the debate kits... Oh, I'm sorry. I thought someone was yelling at me. Most often the debate kit's resources are links to pro-con treatments of that particular topic. So if I'm doing zoos should be abolished, I've got a link to a resource here that lays out the pro and con arguments, usually from something like procon.com, or both sides or all sides is another website that we use. We've got 5 or 6 different websites that we use to kind of gather those from. Another thing that you'll see here is we now have a My Kits option. So later on, once we get through the assignment, assuming that you've built out your own debate kit, you now have the ability to save it for future use. So if you build out a really detailed, intricate, and lots of well-supported resources for a particular debate kit for, say, a history assignment, you can save that debate kit, use it again in subsequent semesters, and it's always going to be there and accessible to you as well. That is the first step toward being able to share that out more broadly to everybody else. So you'll be able to keep your own kits, but eventually, of course, we're going to get to the point where ideally those content area kits are available to whomever might want to come and use the site. But we're going to go with just zoos for tonight. So we'll pick the zoos topic. It's got all my issues pre-populated in there. It's got the resource, and I can add more if I want to. So on to the next step. So here's where we start to see, again, some more familiarity, making choices about how the students are going to decide on the winner of a debate. They can do so individually, submit a model, and they're done, or they can do so in groups, submitting an individual model first in preparation for having that deliberation session. So we're going to pretend that they're going to debate or deliberate in groups. Now here's where things start to look a little different, particularly for the real-time debate. Obviously, with asynchronous debates, we're really limited on the options for interactions between debaters, no cross-examination, no crossfire, because there's difficult to imagine that's going to happen when you're recording speeches asynchronously. But here you've got a lot of different options for formats. So we can have the platform suggest a format for you. You can design your own format, or you can access formats that you've designed previously and have saved for your own reference or your own reuse. So if you want a format suggested, we ask you to specify how you want your students to debate, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, and then ask you about how long do you want the debate to last. So if I want a 2 versus 2 debate that lasts about 45 minutes, I've got a number of different format options that are available here. If I want a 1 versus 1 debate that lasts about 45 minutes, I've got the Lincoln Douglas option. If I want it to be a lot faster than that, I've got the SPAR 1 versus 1 option, or a simple 1v1 option. If I want a 2 versus 2 debate that's a lot longer, of course, you can say I want something to be around an hour. Then you've got high school policy, public forum. So these are all different formats that are available. They're already built into the platform, and you can use them if that's what's most familiar to you and your students. It also provides an option for teachers who don't know how to build a format. One of the things that we'll do eventually, particularly for instructors who might be not very familiar with debate, is have a very narrow pathway that they would proceed through to put a debate together. We call it a quick start option, where we'd largely make a lot of these decisions for them, but all of these features and options are built into the program. So if I choose any one of these, if I choose high school policy, for example, the next screen that I'll see shows me what that format looks like and gives me the option to change around or edit any of those speech times. So this is just your standard policy format with cross-examination built in, specifying who cross-examines who and the order of speeches and all of that sort of thing. But if for some reason I wanted to make some changes to that, say I wanted to use generally the cross-ex format, but I wanted to do shorter speeches, I can edit and adjust all that as well from here. But assuming I'm happy with it, I'd probably click next. If instead of choosing a format, I want to design my own, then I'll eventually end up on that same screen, but it's going to be a little bit different in terms of how I use it. So in this case, I'm going to design my own format. I want to do say I want to do a 2 versus 2 debate, and then ask me to proceed on to the next screen, which takes you back to this screen. But the difference, of course, here is that you're building something from scratch. So we've got these elements over here that you can add to the debate. There are speeches, there are opportunities for interactions between debaters, and then there are notes that you can add to the debate. So when you add in the speech, it asks what you want to call your speech. And we've got some pre-populated ideas. You can call it a constructive or a development speech, or rebuttal speech, or a summary speech, or you can call it whatever you want by adding your own title to it. You then can identify which of the speakers. Remember, this was a 2 versus 2 debate that we identified. So you can choose which of the speakers is going to be responsible for this speech. That helps students know what, in terms of the schedule or the format, how it's going to unfold. You can put in the number of minutes for that. And if you want to make any notes about this particular speech, you can do that as well. You can also add then these interaction elements that are options for the debaters to interact with one another. Cross-examination, perhaps a question segment, more like crossfire in public forum. And again, you can specify the length of that and add notes to that as well. But if you end up getting something out of order and you want to change things around, this also is drag and droppable. So I can just rearrange these by reordering the speeches and reordering the interactions to where I want them to show up. And so it allows you kind of to design that format in the way that you want it designed. Now, all of this is going to require me to fill it all out before I go on. But the point of this is that the custom format builder allows you to put together the type of debate that's going to work for your class, or you can select a pre-loaded debate, edit it to your requirements, and then use that as well.
Hey, Steve, I hate to interrupt, but I am definitely a do while listening kind of person. So as I'm trying to get to that, because I have the assignment from this class that we did tonight, it's not giving me the option to create a class and go through these steps.
To create a class or create an assignment. So if if you're in the
Both.
Ad Astra class, you're a student there, so you wouldn't be able to create assignments. You'd
Okay,
have to
so you
go.
can't do both.
You can't do both in the same class. You're either a student or an instructor in a particular class.
Right. So it won't let me get out of the Ad Astra class to be able to add a class. Like if I click on the all classes arrow to get out, it doesn't take me away from the.
Larissa,
up
can
the
you
home
can you
button.
share your screen so I can see what it is you're seeing?
Hold on.
And
Okay,
Dane,
so-
if you're here, it would be helpful to have you looking at this as well.
So this is here. And then if I click on all classes, it doesn't do anything. If I click on home, it circles here.
I wonder if that isn't because you're not accessing an instructor account.
Yeah, let me just look into this for a
Well,
second.
so I had created this account last week, and we had the issue with my USD email not functioning properly. And so when I went to argutopia.co, it gave me this.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let Dane muck around with it a little bit
Sure.
and see what he
I
can
just
come up
figured-
with.
I'm one of those people. I'm like, I really
Sure.
wish that I could like play with this while we're talking about it.
Sure. Do this for me, Larissa. As long as we've got your
Yep.
screen shared, could you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your screen?
I am all the way down at the
Okay.
bottom.
In the lower left-hand corner, there is that. Yep, that's what I want you to click on, please.
This one?
Okay, so that's you're using the lansinglions.org email.
Yes, we switched to that one because the other one was not sending a key.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking into this right now. I should have something figured out here in a couple minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna proceed on if you don't mind, Larissa.
No,
and then
you
we'll
are
give Dane a
totally fine.
chance.
I will unshare my screen and we can move
Perfect.
forward. I just
Real,
wanted to ask while I could.
Sure,
really
and we'll-
quickly here, I have the same. Oh, I have a similar issue. I can back out of the all classes, but
Okay.
then I just get a box that says Ad Astra training classes, and I have no option to create anything new.
Okay. Well, I tell you what.
Yes.
Let's.
Real quick, I just replicated the issue. I've got some test accounts, and the account that I'm testing with right now is it's not an instructor account, and I'm seeing this this issue too. So it looks like I put in like an automatic routing mechanism. So if you only have one class, you'll just get routed straight to the class, and as a student, you wouldn't be able to go back and create new classes unless we of course assign you an instructor account. So it might be that your account has not yet been tagged as an instructor account, but I can add that pretty quick. If I have the email that you're logged in with, I can just add that real quick and you should be able to have access at that point.
Do you want that in the chat, Dane?
Yeah, sure, that works.
Fabulous.
And Wesley, would you mind sharing your screen so I can see what problem you're having?
Yeah, sure. And I think it might be the same thing here.
It sounds like you're probably not an instructor account too, but we'll take a look
Yeah.
here.
Let's see here. All right. So, do you see my screen of the Ad Astra training?
I see that.
I can
Yep.
go into it and I can click back on the all classes, but then it's just that.
Okay.
And I gone down there and I got the same issue. It's the same
Okay.
issue over here.
Yep. And I think that might be because you're not, for some reason, not giving or not being credited with an instructor account. We'll figure that out and get you on board with that as well.
Okay, good deal.
Thank you. Sorry for sidetracking.
No. This is what beta is all about, right? This is exactly what beta is all about. So
This is why I went ahead and stopped.
You bet. Okay, so I'm going to finish walking through this process of designing a format for, choosing a format for a real-time in-person debate. And I'm just going to select one here quick. So I'll choose a public forum format. And then I can, of course, edit that format if I want to, but I'm going to just assume I'm happy with it. So then I'm to the point where I'm going to assign debate roles. So this is the part where you're giving students responsibilities for either being a pro debater, a con debater, or a judge. So much like we were doing with the asynchronous debates, you can go through and do that individually by picking each student for each role that you want. Now, the students that I have available to me are only the folks here that are enrolled in this training. Or I can have the auto create option populate that for me. So I can select all the students that I want to be debaters, and I can select all the students that I want to be judges. Now I can choose to include them or not, but I'm just going to say I want everybody to be a judge and everybody to be a debater. I click on create debates, and then it goes ahead and puts everybody into debates, populates those, as well as judging responsibilities for all of the debates. Now, one of the things, of course, that's different about in-person debates is that you're actually going to have the debate in class. So you're not going to stagger each of these speeches by the 24-hour cadence that we did with the asynchronous debates. All of this debate is going to happen on the 17th. Then the decision that you need to make is, when do you want your individuals' decisions due from each of these 4 judges, and when will you schedule them to actually engage in that deliberation? We default to the assumption that you've got enough time to do a full debate, to have individuals' decisions produced, and to have students engage in that deliberation. Probably not realistic for your average class period, but you always have the option of being able to change that. If there are going to be multiple debates in your class, if everybody, the 20 students that were enrolled in this, are going to need 5 debates to give everybody a chance to be either a pro or a con debater, and that's exactly what it's produced, is 5 debates. What you'll notice is that we automatically schedule for the days of the week. So we begin on the day that you made the debate available. Here's the 17th. And then the next debate is going to happen on the 18th, the 19th, and then we're going to skip to the following Monday. So there's not a debate scheduled for the weekend. We skip to that following Monday for the last debate to occur. Again, all of this calendaring is editable by you, and you can choose when the class is going to have those debates and when the judges and the individual and the group judges are going to produce their decisions. You can also, of course, change all of the speaking orders around or move people around from pro to con. You can drag and drop people from one judging panel to another to even them out, or to rearrange how those people are put together on judging panels. But all of that is available to you here as well. And then you get to the assignment review process, where you get kind of a bird's eye view of the whole thing. So here's all the details of the assignment: when it starts, what type it is, what your topic and issues will be, how the judges are going to make individual decisions and then collaborate on a group decision, the chance to review the format, and then the scheduled debates showing the pro and con debaters, the people who are scheduled to judge, when the debate occurs, when the decisions are due. And once you're happy with all of that, once you hit create assignment, then that debate becomes available to all of your students, and of course is viewable by you from the instructor's dashboard, where you can go back in and look at student submissions as they're making those contributions, as they're developing their preparation for those debates. So that's a very quick overview of how that works. Be happy to answer questions or respond to comments on any of that. And maybe Dane at this point has gotten Larissa up and running.
Yeah, we figured it out. It was just that the email address wasn't added as a beta instructor yet.
And I don't know, Dane, if you were working on that while Wesley was explaining the problem that he's having. He can get to the class's screen, but he doesn't have the option to add another class.
Oh, Wesley, I think I added you. Can you?
Yeah, I had to resend the email login thing, but I just did it and it shows up now.
Okay, cool.
Good enough. So those are the main things I wanted to cover tonight. If there's more discussion, I am happy to stick around for as long as you all are interested in having discussion.
I do want to try, my goal was to try this with my kids tomorrow. And one of the things that I need